Churchill went with his friend, Reginald Barnes, and on his way he visited the USA for the first time. He stayed in New York with a friend of his mother's. This was Bork Cochrane, a prominent Democrat member of the House of Representatives. If Churchill's notion of becoming a politician was hazy on his arrival in New York, by the time he left, it had become a fixed ambition. Cochrane's fiery rhetoric, political connections, and dinner-table discussions enthused the young journalist. He was also enthused and fascinated by war. For Churchill, it was the ultimate expression of the competition between nations, but also a romantic adventure. His early exposure to its realities, however, was to temper such notions and imbue him with a strong sense of compassion for those who suffered its consequences. In Cuba, he was shot at for the first time, on his 21st birthday. He found the Cuban rebels amateurish, but had little respect either for the Spanish army or its conduct. Overall, he seems to have enjoyed himself, writing colourful dispatches for the Graphic and developing a lifelong passion for Cuban cigars. India. Back in England, he was dismayed to be posted to Bangalore, India, with the rest of his regiment. India held little appeal for him, primarily as he saw it as a backwater. Once there, he spent much of his time devouring the British press, following the issues back home with more interest than he did those on the subcontinent. Nonetheless, the army was there for a purpose, and Churchill determined to involve himself in military action wherever he could. On learning of an expedition against rebellious Pashtun tribesmen on the northwest frontier, Churchill pestered his superiors for an attachment to the force. He finally got his way, and also a contract to write about it for London's Daily Telegraph. The experiences were to form the basis of Churchill's first book, The Story of the Malakand Field Force, which he was to publish in 1898. War on the frontier was tough. Churchill saw a friend cut down in front of him, and had to be given a direct order to leave his stricken comrade as the rest of the regiment retreated. He wrote about the blanket-wrapped corpses who only hours before had been proud soldiers of the Queen Empress. Brave as well as compassionate, Churchill was now an experienced and capable cavalry officer. It was intellectual training, though, which was to prove the more important achievement of his time in India. Despite the excitement of the frontier war, Churchill actually spent most of his days at the barracks in Bangalore. He was acutely aware that he had not been to university, and that this might be held against his ambitions for high office. He was also anxious to develop and improve his written style. With the encouragement of his mother, he set about a systematic program of self-education, which was to remedy these shortcomings. Once again, Churchill was to show determination and self-discipline. As with many challenges in his life, his approach may not have been conventional, but he was ultimately successful. Lady Randolph would send bundles of books to her son, and he would set aside several hours every day in order to read them. He read the classics, history, and philosophy. He quite deliberately modelled his writing style on those of Gibbon and Macaulay, possibly Britain's greatest 19th-century historians, and certainly masters of the written word. Like Abraham Lincoln before him, Churchill was largely self-taught, and also, like Lincoln, he was to become one of the most widely read and highly educated leaders of his age. His personal views were inevitably shaped by this enterprise. To his emerging imperialism and nationalism can be added a fascination with what he would call destiny. Churchill was a strong believer in his own providence, and the idea that some things were meant to be.